Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back here to the full story on WYEB 103.9 on this Friday morning as we start to head into the weekend. And it's supposed to be getting to be snow this weekend, which is not going to be great. I hate snow. It's the worst thing. It's both cold and wet. Two of the worst feelings you can have. But we'll see if we survive the snow. But today on today's show, what I want to talk about first is there is news that the ceasefire deal may in fact go through. We're going to get some updates on that. I'm not going to spend too much time on it just because we've covered it in quite a bit of detail yesterday on the show. Of course, there was a little bit of back and forth. There was a deal, there wasn't a deal. Now they're going to apparently vote on a deal today. We'll see if that happens, but we're going to update on that, as well as some of the last minute provisions, what was holding it up, and things like that. And then finally, I want to get to a couple of stories that have been kind of kept getting pushed this week because of all of the hearings with the hearings with Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi and all of these and all the craziness that was going on there and all the all the idiots that were working around. The We are finally going to talk about. I want to move back to the LA fires. I'm going to give a brief update on what's going on with it, as they are still raging. As they're still trying to get control of those things. It's kind of crazy. It's still going on. I think we're at 11 days now. But I want to focus, on the political side of things again. I want to give an update on what's going on, but then I want to give an update on two political things. One, the mayor herself, how she's handled it, and some pretty crazy things. Like I said, I got a video of her not answering a question that's very interesting, where she just freezes. So we'll have that. You obviously won't be able to see her reaction here on the radio, but you will be able to see it on the live stream. If you connect to the live stream on Rumble or YouTube, you can see that when I play it. But I want to show her her reaction, and then I want to talk about some things about insurance companies. So insurance companies have been in the news, a little bit more recently. Obviously, you had Luigi Mangione with that with the homicide that or the murder that he committed there in Manhattan, and insurance companies are getting back kind of back in the forefront when it comes to disaster-ridden areas or areas that are high risk, and the problems that people are having with insurance over there, and the limited solutions that they have. So it's kind of something that hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but it's an interesting little piece of it's a little interesting piece of things that are going on that people don't quite realize what is going on. So we're going to talk about that as well. So really, some a good story. I want to focus on it. Like I said, this is obviously there's a lot of other things going on right now, but these are the two things that I want to focus. They kept getting pushed this week, and they're really really good stories that I want to bring to you guys. So we're going to go ahead and take our first break right here. When we get back, we'll get into, just like I said, briefly the Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli ceasefire, just because that's really kind of breaking news. I just want to make sure you guys are aware of it. Like I said, not going to go too much in discussion with it, just because we've talked about it at length. And then we're going to move back into the LA wildfires. So if you need to call in during the break, number 601-879-0002. Keep it tuned here to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9 as we continue on. So, like I said, we've been covering the ceasefire deal that's been going on or been trying to negotiate it. If you remember, yesterday we talked about how Biden triumphantly said, "Hey, we have reached a ceasefire." And then Benjamin Netanyahu was like, "No, we haven't. I don't know what you're talking about. Have you talked to me first?" And that was a pretty typical thing throughout this last year. Really, is the United States was working with Qatar and Egypt to work on a ceasefire, and then they weren't really working with Israel with it. And Israel is a actual party to that, so they should be a party to any kind of ceasefire. But now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today a deal to return hostages held in the Gaza Strip has been reached after his office said earlier there were last-minute snags in finalizing a ceasefire that would pause 15 months of war. And that's interesting, right? It's pause, not end. Netanyahu said he would convene his security cabinet later today. It's already getting late over there, actually, in Israel. So we should probably get information about that any time now. But he will convene it later today, and then the government for the government to approve the long-awaited hostage deal. Netanyahu's pre-dawn statement appeared to clear the way for Israeli approval of the deal, which would pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip and see dozens of hostages held by militants in Gaza, militant/terrorist, or actual just terrorist, in Gaza released in exchange for potentially thousands of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. The deal would also allow hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians to return to the remains of their homes in Gaza, which could also mean that it would allow the Hamas to return as well, because they kind of mix in the population. Remember, terrorists don't really wear uniforms. You can't really tell between a terrorist and a non-terrorist. That's just because how they operate. However, airstrikes have been continuing all the way up until yesterday, so they haven't stopped that just in case. And Netanyahu said he had instructed a special task force to prepare to receive the hostages returning from Gaza, and that their families were informed the deal had been reached. Israel had delayed a vote on Thursday on the ceasefire, blaming a last-minute dispute with Hamas for holding up approval as rising tensions in Netanyahu's government coalition raised concerns about the implementation of the deal just a day after President Joe Biden and key mediator Qatar announced it was complete. Like I said, they announced it without actually having a joint thing with Israel, which to me, again, if you're going to announce something, do it in a joint press conference with the country involved, right? Don't just do it on your own. Why would you do it? And that just blew my mind when they did. And we played that for you yesterday, so I'm not going to replay it for you here, but I just thought it was crazy that they're going to announce it and Israel's not even in the room. That makes no sense to me. Netanyahu's office had accused Hamas of reneging on parts of the agreement in an attempt to gain further concessions. In a briefing Thursday, David Mincer, an Israeli government spokesman, said Hamas's new demand dealt with the deployment of Israeli forces in the Philadelphia corridor, which is a narrow strip bordering Egypt that Israeli troops seized in May. Hamas denied the claim, with Israel al-Risk, a senior Hamas official, saying the militant group is committed to the ceasefire agreement, which was announced by the mediators. Of course they are. They're getting thousands of people, or at least hundreds of people, in return for a few dozen. Why wouldn't they be committed to it? That makes no sense whatsoever. And plus, they have the opportunity to move back into their old strongholds, to move back into the tunnels. I do hope that people realize that for the small price they're going to pay for these hostages, for these couple dozen of hostages, that they're going to release hundreds, if not thousands, of dangerous murderers and other terrorists back into Gaza, and they're going to allow Hamas to get back into their own strongholds, which is really just going to prolong this thing. That's really all it's going to do. It's just going to make it where Hamas can regroup and rearm, and there is nothing much that and Israel is going to have to refight this thing as they're going to keep attacking. Remember, Hamas has said they want Israel wiped off the face of the earth. That's what they want. That's what they're going to continue. So that's the person that you can never coexist. If that's what they want, if that's their ultimate goal, well, we can't coexist if you want to wipe me off the planet of the earth. So the deal announced would pause the fighting. Like I said, this is a ceasefire, not a peace agreement, because again, you can't really sign a peace agreement with Hamas. This is apparently so when I mentioned on there, there's supposed to be a three-phase plan. However, really only one phase has been agreed on. The second phase will be negotiated during the planning of the first phase, and again, Hamas is definitely going to violate it. Because they're going to, like I said, they're going to try to regroup. In fact, last time Hamas got stronger the last time they paused in fighting. All it did was have an opportunity for Hamas to get stronger and to regroup, and that's exactly what they did, and that's what's going to happen here. So this ceasefire needs to this ceasefire needs to happen, or needs to only be there for a certain amount of time, very, very short. It doesn't need to last any longer than it needs to. Otherwise, the longer it lasts, the stronger Hamas gets, and the further backtrack Israel gets. And you have to think is that all the Israeli troops that have died over there, to gain that land against these terrorists, all that gets lost as long as this goes on. So, um, you know, they need to really understand how much these hostages are going to cost you, and you have to ask that question: is it worth it? Of course, it's worth it to the families. I 100% can sympathize with them, but at the same time, you have to look out for the betterment of the whole country, not just to do things, to satisfy certain political gains. But this is a challenge for them. Um, we'll see uh, how the government lasts with this. Again, there's been heavy um, backlash from others within the Israeli government, including some saying they would quit if the ceasefire was signed. Because again, I can understand where they're coming from too. So we'll see how the Israeli government handles this, if that's going to destabilize their own government, right? Because it very well could, um, unless they can all come to agreement that hey, this is just for a few days. Donald Trump's going to be in the office over there, and on January 20th, and then it's go time, right? If that's the case, then it can calm them down for just a little bit, and then let's get back into it. And maybe put trackers on the people they're releasing, so you know exactly. Maybe that's not a bad idea, right? Just put little trackers on them that they don't know about, so you see where they, like rats always run back into their holes, so you can see what holes they run back into, and then you know where to strike. I wouldn't put it past Israel, right? They did have the cell phone bombs with Hezbollah in Lebanon, so you know if nothing else, maybe use it for a strategic purpose if you are going to do it. That's my point. All right, we're going to take a break right here, and when we get back, I want to talk about finally getting into the Los Angeles wildfires, update on them, a brief update on them. But next, I want to talk about the mayor and insurance company. So, pretty big story that I've been waiting to talk about all week, and I'm finally going to get to it. If you want to call in during the break, number 601-879-0002. But keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9 as we have now this extended ad-free break for the next while, so I can finally cover these stories that I've been wanting to talk about. So first, just updates on the wildfire. So it has been more than a week since the two massive fires forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes in the Los Angeles area. And officials said yesterday residents won't be going home anytime soon. As the search continues for human remains in the leveled neighborhoods, properties also face new dangers with burned slopes at risk of landslides and the charred debris laden with asbestos and other toxins. More than 80,000 people are still under evacuation orders, and many do not know what, if anything, is left of their houses, apartments, and possessions. Scores of people have gathered at checkpoints to plead with police and soldiers restricting access to their neighborhoods, which also blows my mind. How stupid can you be, right? Hey, there's not going to be much there anyway, so why are you sitting there arguing with the police to get back to your home? I get it. You want to see it, but A, there may not be anything left, and B, are you really going to risk your life to go back there? They're just possessions, man. Like, I get it, but you never know. Like, it's not just a fire. Even the fire is passed. There's other like I just said, there's other hazards that are there with mudslides, dangerous, things that are, like I said, these old houses that have asbestos, and now that's literally been burned asbestos that's just flying in the air. Not going to be great for you. Not to mention all the debris and just stepping on things. Like it's just not safe. So why would you? I just don't understand people that argue with police or or National Guardsmen or firefighters or whoever to try to get back to their houses. Like it's not going anywhere. I promise. It's still going to be there, guys. Cool your jets. Officials said they understand their frustrations. Of course, they're going to say that. They're trying to be nice. But they asked residents for patience as hazardous materials teams and cadaver dogs comb the sites block by block. They said it will be a week or more before people can go back. Again, if there's anything to go back to. In total, so far, these fires have killed 27 people and have destroyed more than 12,000 structures. The scale of the effort will be vast. The area scorched by the major fires is equal to 3 times the size of Manhattan. It is one of the most devastating natural disasters in Southern California history. The government has not yet released damage estimates, but private firms expect losses to climb in the tens of billions of dollars, which would make it one of the costliest disasters in U.S. history. Firefighters were making steady progress in the deadly fires that have destroyed thousands of homes, but residents must prepare for return of the strong winds, Santa Ana winds, that could rekindle and spread the flames, according to what authorities said yesterday. Los Angeles Fire Department Chief Kristen Crowley said a large amount of unburned dry fuel combined with low humidity and the expected return of the harsh Santa Ana winds next week could bring more devastation. She urged residents to clear all brush within 200 feet of their homes. And if you're not doing that, then you're an idiot. Again, just listen to them. You can see that destruction. Try to do as much as you can. Mudslides, however, are also a concern. Los Angeles County Public Works Director Mark Pastrella said he expects massive debris flows when rain finally comes to the region. The county is scrambling to prepare flood control systems for the onslaught. So essentially, when the rain does come, because there's nothing left to hold back any of these mudslides, everything's been burned, the brush has been burned, the trees have been burned. It's just going to create these massive mudslides and flooding because the water's just going to flow freely. But, I just find it interesting that, too, that as Biden leaves office next week, literally leaving the country in flames. He's not responsible for the fire. But I just find it very interesting that that's how he leaves. But speaking of Democrats, I want to talk now about the Los Angeles city mayor, Karen Bass. So apocalyptic fires have always been raging Los Angeles, had been ravaging Los Angeles for more than 24 hours when Mayor Karen Bass stepped off a plane into a now viral encounter that may come to define her mayoralty. That's a hard word to say, by the way, mayoralty. an Irish reporter who happened to be on a flight with her hurled questions at her as she finally dropped in. Like I said, more than 24 hours after it started. So I'm going to play that for you here, and it's quite like I said, it's quite interesting. Again, if you're on the live stream, you can see it. You can see the video itself, but it is it's just you can see her reaction here on this question. So here we go.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home? Madam Mayor, let me ask you just again, have you anything to say to the citizens today as you return?
No. Ma'am, hold on one second.
Madam Mayor, just a few words for the citizens today as you return to deal with the catastrophe.
Can you take this down?
All right. So the great part about that, is that guy. It's just he's not giving up. I can really appreciate someone who doesn't give up like he does. But if you couldn't see the video, he's asking her these questions, and she is just staring blankly. She doesn't even understand what is going on. And this is a massive fire that had already been raging at this point. And she took her time to get back to Los Angeles. As she had left Los Angeles on January 4th, as the National Weather Service intensified warnings about a coming windstorm to attend an inauguration of Ghanaian President John Dramani in Mahama in Ghana. Wow, that Mahama in Ghana. That's as I said that out loud. It was it's a very interesting name for a thing, Mahama in Ghana. But she remained out of the country as the Palisade fires ignited, then exploded, with other fires soon erupting in and around the city. She returned that Wednesday to public outrage about her whereabouts and questions about empty hydrants, an empty reservoir, and according to some, insufficient resources for the fire department, as you asked him there, as they cut their budget to fund all these other programs that didn't help much once the fires started rolling in. And her handling of those questions in the days that followed has only intensified some of the criticism. And again, she's just staring blankly at this guy. And I like I said, that Sky News reporter, I give him a lot of credit. He continues, he doesn't quit. Madam Mayor, anything for the people you'd like to say. I mean, she couldn't even say, hey, my heart is with you, right? Which would have been nothing. But she couldn't even say that. She just froze. She just stood. She just sat there and stared in nothingness. Is all that she could muster. So she has also battled this past the mayor. She has also battled extraordinary dissension in her own ranks, with Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crawley in interviews last Friday, characterizing the department as understaffed and underfunded, and implying that Bass had failed her and the department. Again, and you feel sorry for those firefighters, and I'm glad the firefighters are I'm glad that she is speaking out. Because of course, she's got to save her own butt too. It's like, hey, people are gonna be looking at me and saying why we can't fight these things, and we can't fight them because we don't have the people, we don't have the trucks. Heck, we don't even have water in our fire hydrants. So of course, it's going to be hard for us to fight. And in a moment of anguish where people desperately want heroes and villains to make sense of their own pain, Bass has undoubtedly become a villain for a lot of people, and rightfully so, because of her just poor, not just poor handling of it afterwards, but again, the things that led up to it. Now, you can't, I talked about this when the fires first started, is that you cannot, politicians can't control the weather. They may think they're all powerful, but they can't control the weather. But what they can control is readiness and to how to respond when these natural disasters happen. Now, depending on where your city is, you should know how to be prepared for such disasters. Okay, if you're in New Orleans, you know that you have a risk of hurricane and flooding. All right, so you prepare for those things. And in Katrina, we saw that Mayor Nagin was not prepared for those things, especially compared to Mississippi, which had a lot of destruction in Mississippi, in the southern coast of Mississippi. Again, nothing you could have prevented. Those winds were just so high and leveled it. But the people down in Mississippi, on the coast of Mississippi, came back a whole lot quicker than the people in New Orleans, even though they were hit much harder. So again, I can't prevent it. The destruction's still going to be there. But could you have limited it? Could you have made sure did we have plans in place when this happened to be able to combat this? And Donald Trump had talked about this same area just years before about their lack of readiness and how they're putting their money to these other programs, not conserving water, not doing any of these things that could help them in the case of this disaster. And again, if you're in Los Angeles, if you're in Southern California, you have a high risk of wildfires. There's at least some wildfires there every year. So you know that a wildfire is always on the brink. And you also know that you're in a high wind area. So again, how can we may not be able to stop a wildfire because it gets so dry. I lived in Washington State for a while, and I can tell you that even up there, even though that's the Pacific Northwest, in the summer it gets really, really dry there, and you just be driving, and wildfires will just start randomly. It's just the way it is. And so again, you just got to know if that happens, how am I going to react to that? And then afterwards, so we have the readiness part of it, which they have ultimately failed at. Again, with cuts to the budget, cutting other programs, not having their reservoirs and their fire hydrants ready to go. It's just compounded the problems beforehand. But then you have afterwards, how do you start reacting to it? Because you could be like, look, we made some errors on the way, but now I'm here. Now we're going to work through this. But she hasn't even been able to do that, right? She took her sweet time to even get back to the city, her own city, which is engulfed in flames, which should tell you all you need to know about how she cares about her citizens. But we'll see. She was once considered, one of these people that the Democratic Party looked up to. I don't necessarily want to say go as far as saying a rising star, but someone that look at her. This black woman who's running the Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles. She's doing that, one of the biggest cities in the world. But it is only. This is going to be her legacy. This is what's going to be left over, because a lot of the seeds for this destruction were sown by her. Now, again, it's not solely her responsibility, right? But again, she is the leader of the city, and the buck stops with you. Well, it doesn't necessarily stop. Gavin Newsom and all them are also partly responsible for this too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not letting Gavin Newsom off the hook ever. But you are the leader of that city. And again, what did you do? Sure, there are other problems before you got in office because they love pointing fingers, right? They can say, oh, this is a problem before I even got here. Okay, but what have you done since you've been there? And the answer is absolutely nothing. So she has, like I said, she has to, I don't know, maybe they'll recall her. I don't know, because it is so bad. People are hurting. And that's what I said is that, will the people of Los Angeles, will they be able to have the intelligence to vote out that party, right? Or are they going to be idiots and then vote them right back in? Because again, I've lived in Hawaii and they've done the same thing. We in Hawaii, we've had literally attorney generals get arrested for working with the mafia and all this other craziness and all this public corruption that goes on, and they keep electing the same people over and over again. Hawaii did finally did after COVID. COVID got the mayor in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and COVID just ran it horribly. Caused we had over 25% unemployment. He had these onerous laws saying you couldn't even be outside or else you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor crime. All of these things, and they finally, to their credit, they didn't vote in a Republican, but they did vote in an independent. The Democrat lost in the mayoral election the next time around. So if Honolulu can do it, then Los Angeles can do it, because Honolulu is also one of the highest blue cities in the country as far as percentage-wise. So there is an opportunity to be had to be fixed, and I hope they wake up and they recognize what is going on, and they can say, look, it's time for a new direction, because people's lives were lost, and they lost millions of dollars within that fire. Which brings me to the next story that I want to talk about. Which is the fire insurance or homeowner insurance. And what happened is that a lot of people who lived in these areas, their homeowners insurance was either canceled beforehand or significantly raised in their premiums. So last year, Francis Bischetti said that he learned that the annual cost of the homeowner's policy he buys from Farmers Insurance for his Pacific Palisades home, which is when some big fires had, was going to soar from $4,500 a year to $18,000 a year, an amount he could not possibly afford. Neither could he get into the California FAIR plan, which also provides fewer benefits, because he said he would have to cut down 10 trees around his roof line, which that's on him. Something else the 55-year-old personal assistant found too costly to manage. So what the California FAIR plan is that it is a state insurance, okay? So in a lot of places that are high risk, private insurance will say, hey, either it's going to be too expensive for it, or they're just not going to cover it at all. So what these people do is that the state has these types of plans so that you have something to cover you. Now, most of these plans are exceedingly expensive. So I'll give an example of in Hawaii. Again, that's, I can only give examples of places that I've lived because I know. So in Hawaii, you have different islands, right? And the Big Island, which is the island of Hawaii, they call it the Big Island. That's where active volcanoes are. Now, they're not explosive volcanoes, but they are still, in fact, volcanoes, and they erupt usually at least once a year, if not more. And so there, most people will not insure your house if you live on a volcano. You can imagine why, because you're, in fact, on a volcano. And so, these things do destroy structures sometimes when they erupt. So you have to go through the state insurance plan that Hawaii offers, and like I said, it is exceedingly expensive. Usually, $1,500 or so a month, if not more, depending on your house and everything else. But at a minimum, like I said, you're looking at a minimum of $12,000 to $15,000 or so a year, at the minimum, for some of these things. So these people here, and this is what I find interesting: the amount of stupidity of not only the people, but the housing prices. So that guy, Francis, decided he would do what was called going bare, which is not buying any coverage on the home in his community's El Medino neighborhood. He figured if he watered his property year-round, that might be protection enough to give its location some sort of protection, which in a fire that burns that hot, it means absolutely nothing. And that's exactly what happened. So the home that he lived in for nearly all his life burned down last Tuesday, along with more than 10,000 other homes and structures in that Palisades fire. He said that it was surrealistic. I've grown up and lived here all off and on for over 50 years. I've never in my entire time here experienced this. So Bichetti was far from the only homeowner living in Pacific Palisades or any other the fire-prone hillside neighborhoods who struggled to maintain their insurance amid sharply rising costs and the decision by many insurers to reduce their exposure to catastrophic wildfire claims by not renewing the policies of even longtime customers. And many fire victims reported that insurance had dropped their policies last year. And the fires, which is going to be probably one of the most costly natural disasters in U.S. history, have deepened a crisis in the state's home insurance market that was already reeling before the devastation came. So the state's largest home insurer, State Farm General, announced in March that it would not renew 30,000 homeowner and condominium policies, including 1,600 in Pacific Palisades, where they just let them expire. And that's a pretty crazy thing to think about. You've been living in this place all the time, and all of a sudden the insurance company is just going to, they're just going to decide not to insure you anymore. And then you're reeling, right? You're reeling because if you've lived there for a long time, it may not be as easy to just get up and move, because that really is maybe the only option you have, that or just going without insurance, because again, the state insurance plan is also, you can't afford it. And so you quickly find out that even if you own your home, you can no longer afford to live in your own home just because of the insurance cost itself. So Chubb, another insurance company, and its subsidiaries stopped writing new policies for high-value homes with higher wildfire risk in 2021. Allstate had stopped writing new policies in 2022, and Tokio Marine America Insurance Company and its subsidiary Trans-Pacific Insurance Company pulled out of California, the whole state, last year. Liberty Mutual was sued last month by a homeowner who accused the insurer of dropping her over a bogus claim that her roof had mold damage. That's another thing that sometimes these insurance companies do, is they look at some of the small reasons to try to deny coverage, right, for whatever reason, or just to drop the policy altogether. Because again, it gives them that easy out. Or they can essentially say, hey, you have to make this one fix that has been in your house for years, but now we decide you need to make that fix, and it's going to cost you, again, 10 grand, 20 grand to get fixed. So this really boils down also to the market itself, the housing market in California, which to me shows that these things have been way, way overvalued for a long time, because insurance costs need to be considered in the value of a home. If you move there, you should know that's going to cost you however many, $15,000 a year to insure the home just itself, right? And depending on the home size or what have you. So that needs to be taken into consideration. But also how they actually do these state insurance programs. So what kind of things can we do to try to make them more affordable? And again, in places that have high risk, and that's not just California or Hawaii. That also includes states here in the South, states that are prone, especially if you live right there on the beach in Biloxi or anything like that. If you live in those high risk areas, or if you live in a place like New Orleans, right? If you live in the lower Ninth Ward or something like that, that's heavy flood damage or what have you. Because you have to have the state insurance option, because it's going to fill in where private insurance cannot and will not fill in. Because again, a private insurance company, they are there to make money. They are a business, bottom line. So you have to be able to fill it in places where they just, for business reasons, will not go. And you cannot force an insurance company to insure people. That's not how capitalism works. But how can you either tax or other ways these insurance companies for the other policies they have, because they make a lot of money on things like car insurance, right? To try to make up for that state plan. Now the thing is It's like any kind of tax or any kind of fine, right, or any kind of fee. It gets passed on to the consumer, but if nothing else, it can pass on to a broader swath of people. But then the question is, right? You got to look at things from all different angles. That's what we do here, right? It's called the full story. My thing is sometimes not necessarily put a view for you, but for you to consider all views to come to your own decision, right? To at least consider it is, well, you don't have to live in that particular high risk area. And again, that could be true for a lot of people, but for some people, they have to. They've grown up there. They've had a house there forever. They can't afford to move out of there. It's kind of like I said, you get stuck into an area where I can't afford to live here and I can't afford to move out of here. That's another problem that we see in Hawaii quite often is very similar. Because it's expensive, really expensive to move out of Hawaii because you live on an island unless you leave all your belongings behind. But at the same time, it's very expensive to live there. Same thing with Southern California. Again, this doesn't really affect the highly wealthy people like anything else. Most of the time, this affects people middle class and below. Now, obviously, people who live in a lot of these places, the Palisades, and they're very, very high, very high class or high upper class, or upper middle class. But some of these people, like I said, some of these people I mentioned, they just could not afford to live in their place anymore. So another story. Actually, I'm running out of time. But I had a few more stories of people that were in there. But I think the bottom line, that should at least have people reevaluate the value of the homes that are there. The values of the homes there have skyrocketed. So at least take a look at it, say, hey, we got to put in the fire risk and the insurance risk on this. But two, how to create something that's just slightly more affordable from a state insurance plan to fill in for those gaps where private insurance companies cannot make money, so that we don't have a situation where people absolutely lose everything. All right, we're going to take our last break right here. When we get back, we'll do This Day in History, but keep it tuned to the full story on WYAB 103.9. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the full story on WYAB 103.9 as we get to this day in history. So on this day, January 17th, 1917, the United States finalized its purchase of the Virgin Islands from Denmark in a deal known as the Treaty of the Danish West Indies. The U.S. acquired the islands, then called the Danish West Indies, for $25 million in gold. They don't take cash. They only took gold for an island. If you're wondering how they purchased one, they take it in gold only. So during World War I, the U.S. wanted to secure a strategic position in the Caribbean to protect the Panama Canal and prevent other powers, particularly Germany, from establishing a naval base in the region. The islands were seen as a valuable asset as well for trade routes and maritime commerce in the Caribbean, as well as the Danish West Indies from Denmark. Denmark, they had struggled to maintain the island's economic profitability, so they said, hey, we'll take $25 million in gold. Why not? So although it was officially transferred, although the purchase was officially on January 17th, the island itself wasn't formally completed, or the formal transfer wasn't until March 31st of 1917, the day which is known as Transfer Day in the U.S. Virgin Islands. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. We'll see you back here on Monday, but until then, my name is Matthew Bishop, and you have heard the full story.